international project finance deals and how they work. So this subject is going to deal mostly with investment opportunities and international aspects of these opportunities in various countries across the globe. This course of studies is going to be divided into several parts. We're going to cover basically 6 topics in this course, and we're going to have a series of lectures of this particular course. Today we're going to have 2 double classes, and all of them are going to be lectures. I understand, again, this is a bit difficult to listen to so much information about international project finance deals, but this is how we're going to work, at least today. And also we're going to have more lectures next time, and we're going to devote much more time to seminars in order to in workshops, in order to understand these international financial deals more in detail in terms of international expertise, how some of the international companies are doing that, and some of the individuals. We're going to cover lots of things that basically are going to describe in particular what is the structure of the international financial deals and international projects. Today they are very sensitive issue because we live amid the global pandemics, and many of the international deals have been suspended, or some people and some companies find it really hard to get closer in touch during some of the talks in order to stipulate the contract clauses and some other contract issues, because like I said again, this is the pandemics, and lots of difficulties that people face today are concentrated around this particular issue. The majority of governments across the globe are struggling to fight the cases overload and other issues directly connected with the pandemics. So they have lots of things to do. They've got huge government and budget programs because people are out of work, and many people actually are very difficult to make them to go to the labor market, because they feel like they just get benefits from the government and can go unemployed. And this is another difficulty that people face today, and especially the companies, because they lack some of the most skilled workers across many sectors of the economy. They are afraid to go to offices, they're afraid to contact people to face to face, especially in the services industries. They were really hit hard by the global pandemics and global recession. Some of the countries rebounded really quickly, again due to government stimulating programs in Germany, in Great Britain, in France, in the United States. They all invested huge amounts of money, and many of the projects in investment projects that we are dealing today are very closely connected with the government projects. It is really difficult sometimes to separate them from each other and to understand the basic specifics of these projects. Some economists even say that as soon as these government budget programs stop or get suspended, only then we're going to talk again about some divisions in international finance in order to understand more specifically what is government finance, what is corporate finance, and what is just project finance deals. So today everything gets mixed up because huge amounts of money go into industries, especially in the rich countries. You know that the United States splurged trillions of dollars into infrastructure, and when we're talking about international finance deals, we are also talking about some infrastructure projects, because the main sphere for the international project finance deals is usually infrastructure, and we're going to talk about that in more detail today and the other days as well. So what are the basic features of financing investment projects, and what is actually international project finance? Like I said before, we're dealing with many investment opportunities today and much money going into industries in the countries. Also, we're dealing especially with the green projects today. They are a very sensitive issue today because in 2015 in Paris, a bunch of advanced countries got together to work together to establish the global pact, so to speak, on global climate change. Global climate change threatens the global economy, they say. Many economists, many scientists in various fields are talking about this very important and serious issue. Of course, we do not understand wholly the consequences of this process. We do not fully understand whether it's human-made or it is an inevitable process, and there is something deeper happening in the universe. Maybe this is not only, or maybe only partly, human-made problems and consequences for the global climate change. But the fact is that something is happening, and soon we're going to face a lot of problems in infrastructure again. And like I said, infrastructure projects are always the sphere of international project finance deals. So anytime you read or you listen to the news, to some videos about international project finance deals across the globe and in some countries, usually they're mainly concerned about building some basic infrastructure, physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, schools, roads, bridges, telecommunication systems, 5G networks. These are issues on agenda in many countries of the world. For example, in Europe, in some of the recent years, pre-pandemic years, especially before 2019. They were really talking about building a new telecommunications infrastructure, 5G networks, because their current infrastructure, existing infrastructure, is really outdated and it needs improvement. It needs renovation, reconstruction. In some of the cases, maybe even all they need to do is just smash it everything and build it all new. They invited some Chinese companies to Europe in order to build 5G networks. And they were talking about billions of euros, billions of dollars going into this particular infrastructure projects. But Donald Trump, the former US president, and some of the allies of the United States in Europe got together to introduce international sanctions on China, and in particular Chinese companies doing business across the world, in the United States, in Europe, in the EU, and they started introducing lots of international financial and economic sanctions. They banned Huawei company from building 5G networks in the United States, and there are talks that all the countries in Europe are going to do the same. Germany has not really decided the question yet because they are in the process of elections, and you know that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel is going to step down this year. In particular, in September, they're going to have elections. This period, the 16-year period of Angela Merkel, determined mostly the policy in the greatest and the largest euro area economy. Germany is the largest euro area economy, and what happens in Germany impacts everything what is happening in Europe, in Greece, in France, in Italy, because Germany was always concerned about price stability. It was always concerned about the euro, the stability of the currency, the single currency of the euro area, the euro. They got the European Central Bank based in Frankfurt. Mainly the idea behind this, to locate the European Central Bank in Germany, was because Bundesbank, the Central Bank of Germany, was always concerned about price stability after the hyperinflation years in the 1920s and 1930s, 1940s. After World War I, World War II, they had really great difficulties in restraining inflation, and that is why they created a central bank that was really responsible. So these 16 years of Angela Merkel determined the economic and financial policies across Europe. They determined what kind of bonds they're going to use to finance some sort of activities in Europe. They created, so last year in July, they created Future Generations Fund. Just like in Russia we've got our Future Generations Fund, but we've got that on the federal level for a single country, for Russia. They created something of the sort in the EU, and they created it in order to issue euro bonds. And now these bonds are going to be guaranteed by the combined activity of the euro area countries. They're going to allocate 750 billion euros to various projects in the euro area. The majority of these funds is going to go to Italy to finance infrastructure in Italy in order to construct some of the green enterprises, so to speak, the green industry, green energy, in order to use more renewable energy. And this again leads me to the issue that it is really difficult to separate project finance deals from the federal budgetary projects. They're also about financing these deals, and maybe there are going to be some tenders, government contracts to give to international companies to construct wind farms, solar farms. And this is all going to deal with this particular issue in project finance. It is, like I said, very difficult to separate both. We do not understand wholly the purposes of the government programs in the euro area, and they also have some difficulties in implementing this budgetary program, this budgetary plan, because some of the countries are not really in agreement with the other countries, in particular smaller countries like Poland, and they say even they use this term nationalistic governments, like the government of Poland, the government of Hungary. They use a very pathetic language there, because they're concerned about their smaller economies. They're afraid of this huge debts accumulation. Germany, actually, that was always concerned about issuing euro bonds and in investing some of the common bonds and investments into other economies. So they were always against that. But as soon as the pandemics happened, pandemics was a sort of a stimulating point. That was the turning point in the history of the euro area, because this question was not decided. It was undecided for many years. For decades, they struggled to understand what is best for Europe and how to use more funds, to use them more effectively and better for the infrastructure, for budget activities, for taxation. They were not allowed to issue euro bonds. I mean government euro bonds. So euro bonds are usually issued not only by governments but also by companies. And you may issue these bonds in any currency you would like to. It can be US dollars, it can be euros, it can be anything. British pounds, Russian rubles, if you are a foreign entity. But in Europe, in euro area, they were not allowed to issue government euro bonds, because nobody wanted to be responsible for the other government's debts. European Central Bank is a very great institution. It is responsible for setting interest rates for the euro area, which is currently close to zero, which is flat. Really, the real interest rate is even negative, so nominal interest rates are zero. So that means sometimes even for you to get the money, the government is going to pay you for taking that money in real terms. So money is today very easy to get. It is very easy because the governments across the globe decided to stimulate the economy by lowering down interest rates. And all of the central banks across the globe, from Great Britain to Russia, China, the United States and other countries, all the way down to South Africa, they all drastically reduced interest rates because they wanted to invest more money into the economy, inject more money into the economy, stimulate demand, so that people again started consuming products, and this was meant to be a stimulating, multiplying effect for the economy, to stimulate it, to get it on the wheels again. Now some of the countries, especially the emerging countries in the world, understood that it is very, very risky to issue more money, to inject more money in the economy, because it means inflation. Some of the countries, especially the emerging countries like Russia, Brazil, South Africa, India, they all are faced with rising inflation rates. And inflation is a very serious issue for the society, for the economy, because it drives prices, it drives the value out of the money, the national currency. It affects foreign exchange rates. Russian ruble devalued against the dollar. It lost some 30 to 40% of its value before compared to the pre-pandemic times. In January 2020, we experienced a very, I think that was one of the most stable economic environment for Russia, for Russian economy, the early January 2020, because Russian ruble really stabilized somewhere at 60 rubles a US dollar. That was a very good thing, and today we, looking back to those times, it's like a fairy tale, because in the following months and weeks after the pandemics, in March in particular, March, April, were very, very difficult months for the Russian economy and many other countries across the world. So they started drastically reducing interest rates, and it fueled again the pressure on the foreign exchange rates. The Russian ruble, like I said, devalued. All other currencies also devalued. But then came this huge trillion-dollar packages from the United States, and by June 2020 things started to stabilize a bit. So if we had an exchange rate of 80 and even 82 rubles a dollar in May, the ruble started strengthening, and all other currencies, rich country currencies, emerging country currencies, started to stabilize, and they went up higher and gained some of the ground they lost during the early months of the pandemics. So if we in the international finance we always were talking about some risks that could come from the international finance industry. So we could think of any crisis, but not the healthcare crisis. We could think of economic crisis, we could think of financial mortgage-backed securities crisis, and other sorts of crises, but not the healthcare crisis. Nobody expected that this particular issue is going to have such a huge impact across the globe. Today, a number of governments are splashing money into their industries because they feel like this is the time when it's a high time and the best opportunity, the most important opportunity and issue not to lose in order to invest into greener technologies, into greener industries, greener infrastructure, because they think that this is all human-made, and we should really go to pre-industrial times and keep global temperature up to 1.5 to 2.0 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial times. So that means like the early 18th century. That is the date, that is the time period they count as a basis period for the global climate change. They say that this is a scientifically based target, scientifically based goal, because, well, the majority, or at least the scientists that are in this industry of climate change, in this sphere, they say they created models which prove and say that these global change issues are really human-made, and we should reduce CO2 emissions, and that will be a recipe for the world to recover, and things such as these. So many things may be responsible for the global climate change and for the epidemics, for the droughts, for floods, for ice melting in oceans, in the Arctic and Antarctic. So they are talking about these issues as a very serious issue, and therefore they advise that governments should invest more money into greener techniques, greener industries, greener energies. They should get rid of fossil fuel factories and power plants that use coal to produce electricity. The largest producer of CO2 is China today. 20 years ago that was the United States, but later, more recently, China became the world factory, and now it produces the bulk of global CO2 emissions. International community is trying to call on the Chinese government to be more specific about their ecological goals, environmental goals for the next decades, and they say that by 2060 they're going to reduce the CO2 emissions down to zero and become a carbon-free economy, carbon-free country. But this is very difficult to accomplish. Even in Europe they face many difficulties in implementing government projects in implementing some of the international finance deals and national finance deals to build, to construct the necessary amount, the necessary number of power plants that are going to use greener energy. They're going to completely give up nuclear power in Germany, although nuclear power is not an emitter of CO2 or a greenhouse gas. This is a very well, relatively speaking, this is a clean industry, an energy industry. Although there are, of course, some of the catastrophes that happened in the past. For example, Chernobyl, we remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we remember Fukushima in 2011. This is 10 years from now. But the thing is that some other energy specialists say that we've got no other opportunity but to accept nuclear power, because humans are consuming more and more energy, and certainly the world is going to need more energy in the future. Although there are some other ideas in this particular field, and they are directed at energy efficiency. So today in Europe, in particular in Germany, they're very concerned about efficient energy use. And they say that in order to accomplish that goal, in order to make German economy carbon free by 2050, they really need to reduce energy consumption per capita down to 340 kilowatts an hour a year per capita. So that means this is a very low number. Just think about this number. To Russian ears, to Russian citizens, it sounds really unrealistic, because if we count energy consumption in Russia per head, annual energy consumption, not monthly or quarterly, but annual energy consumption per head, it's going to be much larger. Well, Germany, of course, is a very energy efficient country. They are very, very concerned about energy efficiency. Today, they consume 872 kilowatts an hour annually per capita. So each German citizen consumes almost 900 kilowatts an hour annually. And this is also very small compared to Russia. But they say in order to really reach zero-to emissions by 2050, they should halve the amount of energy consumed in Germany. Also think about other issues that are happening in the world. For example, in order to produce one Bitcoin, the Bitcoin currency is a cryptocurrency that can be used by some of the companies and some of the governments as payment, as legal tender even. For example, El Salvador, today, on September the 7th, El Salvador, a small country in Latin America, decided to introduce Bitcoin as a legal tender. This is the first country to use Bitcoin as a legal tender, and well, maybe it is a very, very sensitive issue and a very comprehensive issue for a very small economy, but the government says that this is going to attract more investments into the country. Well, we'll see about that, of course, what's going to happen next to this economy. But just a single Bitcoin to produce consumes exactly the amount of annual per capita energy consumption in Germany. So think about it. One Bitcoin, a single Bitcoin currency, cryptocurrency, takes the same amount of energy to produce just like a single German consumes during a whole year. So this is a lot of energy. China, which was the global leader in producing bitcoins, in mining bitcoins, in 2019 and 2020, many people went there because electricity there is really cheap. There are other countries with cheaper electricity, like Belarus, for example. But Belarus is a country with poor infrastructure, so they prefer China because China as a country has more state-of-the-art infrastructure and modern communication networks, so they can use blockchain techniques and blockchain activities more efficiently. So they see that China is a perfect place to mine bitcoins. But again, a couple of months ago, I think it was in June, China banned actually each and every activity concerned that was connected with mining bitcoins there. So China is not a country to produce bitcoins anymore. So they had to go to some other countries in the Southeast Asia, or in particular other offshore countries like El Salvador or Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, maybe even Great Britain, but Great Britain is not a very good country because energy is really expensive there, just like in Germany. So Europe is certainly not the place to mine bitcoins. So we've got very many issues that really demand answers today, because we do not really understand where we go and what we want, what the governments want. There are some other environmental issues concerning these huge infrastructure projects, green projects, so-called green projects. For example, China, the United States are obsessed with building solar farms because some people think that we may reduce CO2 emissions by producing renewable energies, and in order to produce these things you got to have solar farms or wind farms. But in order to produce just a single wind farm, you got to have a special wood, which is called balsa. Balsa is a very light and very strong kind of wood, and it grows in especially I think 70% of crop of this wood is grown in Ecuador. Again, this is a very small country in Latin America. This is a banana republic for the world, for the global market, but it is also very rich in balsa wood. And many companies, including Chinese companies, went to Ecuador and they started logging down whole forests of this precious wood. Of course, again, this brings money with it. The government of Ecuador was quite happy about lots of money coming in into this country, but what happened next was that it had a very drastic environmental impact, like you understand, because Ecuador is an Amazonian country, and the Amazonas, the forests, tropical forests, produce lots of oxygen, and well, actually it serves many other purposes for containing global climate change, but these drastic activities on part of international companies to produce more renewable energy facilities in other countries, you got to destroy the environment in a country such as Ecuador. So we've got to find a sort of a compromise, a sort of a trade-off between things that demand answers today. So we cannot sacrifice smaller countries for the sake of larger countries so that they could go carbon-free by 2050 and other countries by 2050. Well, what is going to happen with Ecuador by 2050 if they continue producing wind farms at such a scale? They're going to completely destroy the environment in the Amazonas, or Brazil is going to join that sort of a gold rush, so to speak, of the 21st century gold rush for balsa tree in Brazil, because Brazil is also an Amazonian country, and this country already damaged the Amazon rainforest so much that some economists in Europe are talking about buying out this whole rainforest from the government of Brazil. Of course, nobody is going to allow that, but such projects and such ideas sometimes sound really strange from the mouths of some of the politicians in Europe or economists, but such projects exist. Also, one more issue which concerns project finance deals across the countries and in the global economy is insurance industry. So, in order to understand the workings of international finance deals, we also got to understand the workings of other industries that go really in close touch with that particular kind of investment opportunities. Global climate change means more floods, some people say, and some scientists say, and hurricanes, these sorts of typhoons, floods. Germany experienced great floods this year. Lots of houses, lots of property was damaged and destroyed, and insurance companies went on a brink of collapse in Germany, some of them at least. That was a very difficult and very serious issue. In Russia, we also had some floods problems in the Crimea or in the south of Russia. We had these great floods. So these floods destroy property, and property is always a sort of an insured asset. So insurance companies got to pay these risks. They're exposed to climate risks as well. So that means in the next couple of decades we will have to deal with this particular issue. We will have to move cities from coasts closer to the inner territory of the countries, and that means we will have to build more homes, build more offices, more flats, houses, and other properties away from the coastline. And many countries in the world have these coastlines saturated with cities and saturated with people. In 2004, during one of the greatest storms in the world history, in the human history, some 300,000 people died due to floods and tsunami in Southeast Asia, because people lived really close to the coastline. So global climate change forced them, or these floods forced them, to move into the inner territory, away from the coastal line. And other countries will have to deal with the same problem. They will have to move their factories, they will have to move homes and office buildings away from the coastal line. They will also have to think about social distance problems. So the pandemics again raised more questions about social distancing, rules and restrictions, and that means either if you want to get more people to work back again from home, you got to build more office buildings, or you got to renovate or reconstruct the existing facilities, or do at least something in order to separate people from each other, to keep distance. So that means again more office buildings, more office rooms, etc. So they will have to deal with this issue as well. As soon as the economies recover, and certainly this is going to bring more people back to work, due to especially the vaccination procedures going forward. In some of the countries, a whole 70% of the population is already vaccinated, fully vaccinated, in the United States, in Great Britain, in Israel. So these countries are going to benefit from vaccination activities quicker than other countries that are lagging behind, like Russia, for example. In Russia, we really lag behind the United States and other economies, other countries. And maybe we're not going to really benefit from these vaccination activities all the way to 2022, maybe even longer. It will take a longer time period for us to understand that this is a very important and serious issue. However, Israel, like I said, this is a very successful country in vaccination rate, but recently I read an article in The Economist which said that they have a very serious issue about rising infection cases, COVID-19 cases, overload of the vaccinated people. So that means either the vaccines are not really effective, or even vaccinated people can get infected. So there are many issues going around in this particular field, and we do not understand what's going to happen next. We do not know what kind of variants are going to emerge, variants of COVID-19. They're talking about the Delta variant, they're talking about Mu variant, and other many other mutations. So we do not know how long it will take for the economies, for the countries and their healthcare industries to really strike a complete blow to that COVID-19 crisis. There is no light at the end of the tunnel yet, because we really are not quite sure about this disease. We do not know a lot of things about it today. It appears that science, medical sciences, biology, microbiology were unable to discover these issues in pre-pandemic times in order to prevent such crises from happening. And today, within this crisis, we do not understand how we can deal with that. So it was completely unexpected. It was a completely force majeure activity, force majeure issue. We're still in the risk. Of course, we got used to it a bit, because we open schools, we open universities, we open shops, restaurants, tourism industry, flights. We open borders to other countries. Each day or maybe each week we allow more people to go to other countries or allow them to come to our country. So things seem to improve, things seem to get normalized. Even before the pandemics, we were talking about some sort of normality. But the economists meant financial normality, economic normality, because we live in very uncertain times when anything may happen in the financial industry. So it may explode, some things may accumulate, some things may accumulate and lead to a sort of a blown up explosion in the markets, like in 2008 in the United States. A very small market, subprime mortgage market, collapsed, and the financial industry collapsed with it. Lehman Brothers collapsed. So we were expecting a financial crisis, but not a healthcare crisis, like I said. We could expect anything but not this. And we were talking about that sort of normality, so that we could live in a world of turbulence, financial turbulence, like small islands of safe havens, so to speak. When you got a financial industry or a banking industry that is really responsible, that is really resistant to financial crises, to financial shocks in other countries. Because we live in the globalized economy. The global economy is, what does it mean, global economy? Global economy means that all countries in the world are dependent on each other. The interdependence between countries was so large that anything that happened, even in a small country, could lead to some drastic effects in other countries. For example, in 2011, during the Fukushima crisis in Japan, some small factory that shipped very important chips to automobile manufacturers in the United States, stopped supplies, temporarily stopped supplies, suspended supplies to the United States of this particular auto chips. And a number of a number of automotive works in the United States suspended their production facilities, their production activities. Economists calculated that that effect cost American GDP 0.5% that year. So that means we live in a system of supply chains that are very easy to break and very difficult to reconstruct and sustain. In the past, we were creating the global economy, and the international companies invested really much into global facilities and global supply chain links, supply chain hubs in many countries. They constructed their whole economies outside their countries. For example, the United States built a second economy across its borders abroad, in China, in South Korea, in Japan. Japan built factories in the United States. So they invested into each other's economies, and they really benefited from these processes very much. Transnational corporations were concerned very much about decreasing costs, decreasing manufacturing costs. The whole idea of international business was to reduce costs so that products get cheaper and more products were being produced. So the more products you produce, the cheaper they get. This is a very this is the very sense of economics. This is the basis, the background of economic theory. You got to decrease resource use, you got to decrease each and every kind of cost. So international companies were considered to be the saviors of the global economy and the world food difficulties, because, well, he could produce cheap food in order to nurture people in very poor countries. Only the TNCs, because they produce lots of goods, and the economies of scale was the very technique to reduce costs, to reduce prices for raw products. And many people across the world stopped being poor. So that was a very important instrument to fight poverty. It helped some people come out of poverty very, very quickly. But today, they're speaking about huge investments into things that are not really concerned about costs. They set goals to reduce down the amount of CO2 emissions down to zero by 2050 at any cost, which means that they're going to use money, taxpayers' money, to invest into production facilities, into manufacturing facilities that are going to get greener, more environmentally friendly at any cost. To use the phrase of Mario Draghi, the former European Central Bank governor, we should save the world economy, the global climate, at any cost. Whatever it takes, he said, in 2012, I believe. He said whatever it takes, we must bail out the euro. We must save this currency. We can use the same phrase today. So whatever it takes, we got to save global climate we got to prevent it from changing anymore. And they're going to invest to use all money they have. And this is, like I said, this is going to cause environmental disaster in one countries and prosperity to other countries, and zero to emissions as well. So they're going to build their environmentally friendly infrastructure at the cost and at the expense of environmental damage in smaller countries with looser environmental standards, environmental enforcement procedures. Like I said, Ecuador is a very small country rich in balsa, and balsa is used to produce wind farms, wind turbines. But the more wind turbines you produce, the more balsa tree you need. And that means complete deforestation in some of the countries that produce that sort of wood, that sort of timber for the construction. And so, to my mind, to my view, I think that this is going to cost too much. The climate change activities are really, really expensive. Also, this particular issue that I was trying to talk about, global supply chains again, they get destroyed these days because countries impose international sanctions and against each other. We've got this trade war between the United States and China. Maybe Europe is going to join the United States really soon, and China will be isolated altogether. And this will lead to more drastic economic effects for the whole global economy, because China is the supplier of manufactured goods. It is the supplier of rare earths. Rare earths, actually, we need them in order to produce electric batteries, electric cells. We need rare earths such as nickel, lithium, in order to produce lithium-ion batteries for cars. So in order for the auto companies, for car manufacturers to get greener, they got to have batteries. And in order to produce them, you got to have rare earths. And 2/3 of rare earths are supplied by Chinese companies these days. This is because of some of the policies of the United States and Europe in the past, because they in the United States wanted to save environment, and they outsourced their production facilities to other countries because they thought that was the way to reduce CO2 emissions in their countries. Of course, it led to more CO2 emissions in emerging countries, in China in particular, but they thought that was a good idea. Today, in the world of international sanctions and delinking, when countries get separated from each other, like the United States and China, they almost separated from each other. They sever the links between their economies. They continue doing that. So they will have to find these rare earths. They will have to reopen some mines in the United States to produce more rare earths in order to create electric batteries to power their cars. Automobile industry is a very, very important industry in the economy of any country. It is the driver of economic growth. It is the driver of economic growth in countries such as Germany, France, Japan, the United States, because in 2019 was the best year ever. That was the golden age of car manufacturers in the world. They produced 90 million cars, I think, that year in 2019. After that, the global pandemics, international crisis, global supply chain crisis, they severed the links. They try to get their products and factories back to the United States. Donald Trump wanted their facilities back into to the United States. He wanted more. He wanted to create more jobs for the American people in the US economy, and actually he really kept that promise, because unemployment in the United States fell to historic lows in the United States, down to 3.5%. That was an absolutely historic record in terms of the US economy. This economy actually never experienced in the living history, in the living memory, such a low unemployment rate. 3.5% was just a sort of a fairy tale for this economy. They used to have 5.5%, 6.5%, 7.5%, but 3.5% was an absolutely historic record. Other economies like Germany also really benefited from these activities. They also reduced unemployment, especially after the global financial crisis that hit these economies really hard. The euro area economy did not really recover from the global financial crisis of 2008, and especially the euro crisis 2011-2012, when many people thought that the euro would collapse. It did not collapse, but still the euro area economy did not recover fully its GDP of pre-euro crisis level. It was difficult back then, and it maybe is going to be difficult even today, especially when countries getting deeper into government debts. They try to sell more bonds. They use more and more taxpayer money. That means they accumulate huge amounts of government debt. In Germany, debt to GDP ratio exceeded the level allowed by Maastricht Treaty. According to the Maastricht Treaty, like you know, debt to GDP ratio should not exceed 60%. But today it exceeds 90% in Germany. It exceeds 230% in Italy. It exceeds over 200% in Greece and other countries. It is over 100% in France, in Britain, and many other countries, because of, like I said, this huge stimulating activities on part of the government. These whole money injections in Europe and the United States, $1 trillion, trillion euros, budget deficit is really large in these countries. Russia did not really use much of that steam yet, but it appears they're going to use it still in the end. You know that Russia was trying to delink from the US dollar, and we really drastically reduced the amount of US dollars kept in the government vaults. We reduced the share of US dollars in foreign exchange reserves down to 32%, if I'm not mistaken. We almost completely got rid of the US dollars in the Future Generations Fund. So the government actually did many things in order to de-dollarize the economy of Russia recently, in recent years. But also recently, and that came as a surprise, I think, to many people, because we did not do that during several decades. From the Yeltsin times, we did not receive loans from the IMF. But a month ago, last month, Russia borrowed $17.5 billion from the IMF. That was the first time in 2 decades, I believe. So what is the reason for that? Maybe, well, there are some this is again, so all the way to August 2021, the government did everything in its power to reduce the dependence of Russian economy on the US dollar. They reduced it. They reduced the share of US dollar in foreign exchange reserves and some government federal funds, etc. And they all, I think they reduced it, they de-dollarized the Russian economy down to a certain minimum. But then, I think, they started to experience a sort of a dollar hunger and dollar shortage, because they were afraid of another dollar hunger in the Russian economy, because, like you know and like you understand, banks are very, very sensitive about anything happening in the economy, about financial risks, about foreign exchange risks, and they start buying more dollars in order to ensure their activities in the future. They got to ensure themselves against a sort of a financial crisis. So that means they get rid of the rubles and buy more dollars. So maybe part of the reason the Russian government decided to take a loan such as this, $17.5 billion, so that they could have that money to inject into the market in order to stop the financial crisis from spreading and this dollar shortage spreading.